The film begins with a bunch of gangsters packaging drugs for delivery, but then a masked figure enters and attacks the establishment, intending to steal the gangsters' drug stock. Even though he was alone, the masked man defeated the gangsters one by one. However, when he had successfully seized the gangsters' drugs and was about to flee, a police unit emerged and trapped him, resulting in his arrest and imprisonment. Terry Savage, the disguised man, reveals himself to be a former Marine sergeant. His military record was also exposed, with the government awarding him numerous medals for his service on the battlefield, particularly in Afghanistan. But before being imprisoned, Terry is visited by a police commissioner named Harvey, who questions why a military hero like him has turned into a street criminal. Terry was irritated by Harvey's statements, which he stated was due to the difficulties of life after retiring from the military. He believes that his country does not value his service as a combat veteran, making it impossible for him to get a job paying a good wage. Hearing this, Harvey stated that the reason for meeting Terry was to assign him a mission while in prison. Later, he discovered that he had been ordered to examine a jail warden suspected of numerous legal crimes, including human rights violations, acts of corruption, and drug trafficking. Harvey claimed that the police had a tough time investigating the prison because it was so secure, and that the top warden appeared to be above the law, possibly protected by mafia groups and corrupt government officials. Harvey assured Terry that he would be free of all sanctions and that all of his criminal records would be deleted if he achieved his mission, to get a decent job to pay for his daughter's medical needs, who turned out to be severely ill. Terry's daughter's health is the primary reason he is looking for illegal ways to make money. With all of these factors, he eventually accepted Harvey's offer, and Harvey also offered him 10 days to complete the mission. Terry was eventually brought to prison with the other detainees when the agreement was reached. When they got to the prison, they were greeted by Lieutenant Killian and his deputy, Roy. Killian emphasized to the new convicts the need of following all of the jail warden's directives. If anyone disobeyed, they would face the most excruciating penalty. Following that, all of the convicts, including Terry, received a chip injection in their necks, which was used to track all of the prisoners' movements within the prison. Then they were all assigned to their own cell chambers. Terry learned that the prison where he was presently was not like any other, because the majority of the inmates were high-class criminals known for their brutality. When Terry arrived to his cell, he reportedly obtained a cell phone from Harvey, which was hidden under the bed without the knowledge of the prison guards, and he used the cell phone to report to Harvey about all of the crimes that occurred in the prison. The scene then turned to reveal Terry in the dining room. Not long after, a prisoner named Chris attempted to cause trouble for him, but he refused to serve Chris, even though Terry could beat him up. The next day, Terry was in the prison yard when he was approached by a prisoner named John who encouraged him to join his mafia organization. John emphasized that Terry would be secure if he had allies in prison, but he refused, preferring to act alone. Terry witnesses a gang of prisoners attacking John in the wash area in the evening, but John easily overcomes them. Terry was attacked by Chris and his friends in his cell at night, but a prisoner intervened to help him. Shortly after, the wardens arrived and separated them. Following that, the convicts who battled, including Terry, were locked in their isolation rooms. The next day, Killian brought Chris and Terry to meet Lucas, the chief warden. Chris received a harsh sentence from Lucas for attacking new convicts without permission. Terry was then led into Lucas's room, where Lucas apologized for Chris and his companions' attack on him. Soon after, Lucas told Terry to sit down, because he was interested in Terry's background as an ex-Marine on whom he could rely. He explained that he oversaw a chamber he dubbed the dungeon. Lucas said that if Terry agreed to work with him as a combatant in the dungeon, he would get Terry out of prison as quickly as possible so he could see his daughter again. After that, Lucas handed Terry a fighter's suit and instructed him to meet a prisoner who would become his roommate. Then a female warden named Maria led Terry to the cell chamber. When he first entered the cell, he was astonished to see that his roommate would be a prisoner named Bones, who had assisted him the night before. Terry was inquisitive and wondered why Bones was so skilled at fighting. Bones responded that his father was a martial arts master. Bones then warned him about the hardship of battling in the dungeon, but he also vowed to help him face all of his opponents. Terry then went to the toilet and told Harvey about the dungeon. The next day, Bones led Terry to a gym room to train martial arts before confronting the fighters in the dungeon. Next, he discusses which mafia factions Terry will face later. One of them is John, the top dog or defending champion. Terry then realized that every Friday night, The selected prisoners would be brought to the dungeon to face off in battle, and it was his turn. Killian and Maria brought Terry, who was already dressed in a fighter uniform, to the fight arena, where he was joined by Bones. Terry arrived and noticed Lucas sitting on his throne. When Terry first arrived at the dungeon, Lucas emphasized that this was a place for wild combat with no rules. Furthermore, the combat would be televised live to all convicts and on a paid basis via the internet. At the same time, a battle broke out in prison between representatives of two mafia organizations, one of which was John, the reigning champion known as Freeway. Then John easily won the duel, retaining his title as top dog. Terry then faced El Papiro, the representative of a Mexican mafia clan. Terry, who was still stiff, was easily knocked out in the first round by El Papiro, but in the second round, his adrenaline began to surge, and he eventually turned things around and won the fight by knockout. His victory was met with shouts from the prisoners, including Lucas, the warden, who appeared pleased with his appearance following the fight. John was instructed to face Lucas and choose a reward for his victory. Lucas then told John that he could make whatever request he wished, and he asked to be released from prison, as Lucas had promised previously. Lucas, on the other hand, declined his request, explaining that John needed to win at least one more bout before he could be released. Hearing this, John and Lucas argued that if he did not honor his pledge, John, his group, and the other prisoners would start a riot in the prison. Terry is then visited by a lawyer named Jeanette, who previously assisted in the release of war veterans from prison. She claimed to have seen it and decided that Terry's criminal case was brought because he was obliged to pay for his daughter's medical expenditures. So Jeanette planned to provide legal assistance to get him out of jail. Terry, on the other hand, is now on a covert mission from Harvey. Therefore, he is unable to accept her legal assistance. The scene shifted again, and Terry was seen in the dining room, but John immediately threatened him because he was unhappy with his success the night before. John then cautioned Terry not to meddle with him if he didn't want to end himself in serious problems in prison. Long story short, Terry is back in the fight, and this time he must confront Dragon, one of Asia's mafia group captives who appears pompous while demonstrating the kung fu moves he knows. But shockingly, Dragon was destroyed by Terry with a single punch, which enraged John even more because he feared Terry would take his spot as top dog or the toughest prisoner in the prison. When Terry returned to the cell, Bones explained why he could be imprisoned. He killed the person who had molested his younger sister. Terry sympathized and stated that he was a good man. At the same time, Bones commended Terry, calling him a terrific father. Terry was unexpectedly attacked by several members of John's group the next day, while on duty. Maria, who witnessed this, attempted to interfere but was stabbed by one of John's guys. Fortunately, she was saved, which enraged Terry, so he went to Lucas and urged him to organize a fight between himself and John. Lucas declined Terry's offer, claiming he was not prepared to fight John, a top dog and champion fighter. But Terry persisted and pressed him to organize the fight. On the other hand, John appears to have never directed his team to attack Terry, and he was furious when he learned of his comrades' irresponsible behavior. After that, Lucas took John's gang to the dungeon to be punished because he was displeased with their behavior, which had hurt one of the wardens. Lucas even had the courage to kill two of John's men as a warning to John so that he could look after his group and not break the regulations he had established. After warning John, Lucas finally instructed John to fight Terry. Meanwhile, Terry appeared to be working hard to prepare for the match, while also communicating with Harvey about the prison conditions and the violations he encountered. Long story short, Terry and John began their fight, and Terry dominated the first round. The same thing happened in the second round, as he maintained control despite John's many counterattacks. Terry ultimately defeated John, the defending champion, and earned the top dog title. Terry's win over John last night prompted all convicts to acknowledge and surrender to him. Terry was spotted battling Lucas in the day, and Lucas complimented him for his victory the night before because his battle footage sold for a high price. For this reason, he nominated Terry as his confidant in charge of all the convicts in prison. Not only that, but Lucas requested Terry to help handle his drug operation, which was hidden in prison. After being entrusted with handling Lucas' drug business, he discreetly took drug samples. Lucas then presented the bodies of the two members of John's group he had killed for attacking Terry, claiming that he had evidence that he genuinely cared about Terry's safety in prison. However, it served as proof for Terry in revealing Lucas's human rights breaches while in prison. Aside from that, Terry did not appear to be persuaded by Lucas's offer, instead coldly rejecting it, stating that all he wanted was to get out of prison, as Lucas had promised previously, so he could meet his daughter again. When Lucas heard Terry's refusal, he took him to meet someone waiting in his room, who turned out to be Harvey, revealing to Terry that the mission was a ruse designed to trap him. Terry eventually discovered that Harvey and Lucas had collaborated in handling illegal companies in the prison, including the drug trade. Then they took use of his combat abilities as the top-form Marine with experience in the street drug trade. However, Terry insisted on refusing their offer. Unfortunately, it was discovered that they had kidnapped Bones and threatened to kill him in order to get Terry to obey their demands. In the end, he must obey Harvey and Lucas. Without Lucas and Harvey's knowledge, Terry and Bones quietly organized a revolt among all of the captives. Terry had it simple, because all of the convicts in prison were already on his side and tired of Lucas' arrogance and arbitrary behavior toward the prisoners. All of the convicts in prison began to collaborate to aid Terry's scheme. He sought Jeanette for assistance with his legal issues, and she offered to aid him at the time. Then he turned over all of the proof of Lucas and Harvey's misdeeds that he had gathered thus far, as the negligent Harvey had obviously forgotten to take all of the evidence from him. For the following fight, Lucas purposefully recruits Kaka, a powerful fighter from another prison, to fight Terry. Soon later, the conflict between them begins. Terry was knocked down several times by Kaka in the first round, but in the second round, he began to turn things around and realized Kaka's flaws, and in the end, he defeated Kaka. Terry then ordered all of the prisoners to riot in the dungeon, escalating the tension and chaos. Shortly after, Lucas' men emerged with firearms to suppress the rioting, but their efforts were futile because they were outnumbered by the inmates. At the same moment, Lucas attempted to save himself, but Terry discovered this and pursued him until they ultimately met. Lucas, who had a gun, shot Terry as he was ready to assault him, but Terry survived since he was wearing a bulletproof vest, which is one of Lucas' fighting abilities. Not long after, officers from the headquarters arrived at the prison, arrested Lucas, and put down the rioting in the dungeon. The police arrived in time for Jeanette's report, which informed them of the crime perpetrated by Lucas and his accomplices. The film concludes with Terry meeting Jeanette, who informs him that he has gotten a prize from the government for complete freedom in exchange for his assistance in discovering a crime case at the jail involving Police Commissioner Harvey and several prison wardens, including Lucas. Not only that, but the government would pay for Terry's daughter's treatment until she is fully recovered. Before leaving prison, Terry said goodbye and thanked Bones for his assistance while he was there. Terry was greeted with shouts from his cellmates, who complimented him, and he eventually got out of prison and was able to see his daughter again. Meanwhile, Lucas is crying and grumbling because he has been imprisoned in a special cell and will be held accountable for all of his sins. The film concludes with a moral message that we may take away from it. Don't condemn someone entirely based on their background or position. Even a state apparatus that is supposed to uphold the law can change due to circumstances, such as Terry, who was forced to commit crimes to pay for his daughter's treatment, and Lucas, who abused his authority as a law enforcement officer in prison by exploiting prisoners to fight and run a drug business with Harvey, the police commissioner who represents justice.